Let me ask you a question. When you think of a manipulator, what comes to mind? You might picture a villain from a movie, someone obvious, sneaky, and cruel. But in real life, manipulators rarely look like that. They don't walk around with warning labels. They don't announce their intentions. In fact, they often appear to be the opposite. Manipulators usually show up in our lives wearing a mask of charm. They seem helpful, attentive, even caring. They listen when others don't. They flatter when you're feeling uncertain. They make you feel chosen, seen, important. And yet, underneath that polished exterior, their goal is not to build you up, but to quietly erode your confidence and steer your judgment for their own benefit. That's what makes them so dangerous. Manipulators don't always steal your money. What they steal is much harder to replace: your trust, your self-belief, and your clarity of judgment. They drain you of the very tools you need to protect yourself. And here's the twist. Most people, if you ask them, will say, "I don't know anyone like that. I would never fall for manipulation." But denial is exactly what keeps people vulnerable. The truth is, if you're human, you've been manipulated. Maybe in subtle ways, maybe in ways you never noticed. And the more you deny it, the more blind you remain to it. The Stoics would tell us that the greatest danger in life is not the hardship itself, but our blindness to it. Epictetus once said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." If you believe you're immune to manipulation, you've already given manipulators the advantage. So, how do we protect ourselves? How do we stop walking blindly into traps that are set not with force, but with flattery, charm, and subtle control? This is where Stoicism becomes not just philosophy, but a shield. Stoicism is about seeing things as they are, not as we wish them to be. It doesn't sugarcoat. It doesn't let us hide behind illusions. Instead, it teaches us to strip away appearances and look directly at reality, even when it's uncomfortable. Think about it. Most people prefer to believe the story someone presents, rather than what their actions reveal. We'd rather accept the comforting lie than the painful truth. But the Stoics remind us that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, is always safer than illusion. Because once you see clearly, you cannot be controlled. In this video, we're going to uncover 5 of the most common manipulation tactics. These are the strategies manipulators use again and again, sometimes without even realizing it themselves. And alongside each one, we'll uncover a Stoic defense. A way to protect your peace, your clarity, and your strength without falling into their traps. Before we dive in, let's ground ourselves in a simple but powerful image. Imagine walking through a forest. If you've trained your eyes, you can spot the snakes on the path before they strike. You don't need to hate them. You don't need to fight them. You just step carefully and move forward. But if you walk blindly, assuming there are no dangers, every step puts you at risk. Manipulators are the snakes on life's path. Pretending they're not there doesn't keep you safe. It makes you vulnerable. The Stoic path is about sharpening your vision, so you can see them clearly, avoid their traps, and keep walking with calm strength. And here's something even more important. Learning about manipulation isn't about becoming paranoid or cynical. It's not about distrusting everyone around you. It's about balance. It's about developing the clarity to separate genuine kindness from calculated charm, real friendship from hidden agendas, true guidance from quiet control. Because when you can tell the difference, you move through the world with confidence. You're no longer shaken by other people's games. You don't waste your energy on paranoia because your eyes are open. You simply see, and in seeing, you remain free. Now think back on your own life for a moment. Have you ever felt like you were pressured into saying yes when you wanted to say no? Have you ever left a conversation feeling smaller, less certain, less confident than when you entered it? Have you ever had someone's help leave you feeling more dependent on them instead of stronger in yourself? If you have, then you've already brushed up against manipulation. And the truth is, most of us have, many times. The difference is, some people keep repeating the cycle, while others learn to see it and step out of it. That's what this video is about. Over the next few minutes, I'll guide you through 5 powerful lessons from Stoic philosophy that expose how manipulators operate, and more importantly, how you can defend yourself with clarity, calm, and inner strength. Because the goal is not just to avoid being controlled. The goal is to live with such self-mastery, such clarity of vision, that no one can shake your foundation. And here's the promise. Once you learn to recognize these tactics, you'll start to notice them everywhere. In business meetings, in relationships, even in casual conversations. And once you see them, they lose their power over you. So stay with me. By the end of this journey, you'll be equipped not only to spot manipulation when it comes your way, but to rise above it, calm, unshaken, and fully in control of yourself. Because in a world full of noise and hidden agendas, clarity is the ultimate strength. Tactic 1. Making you doubt your instincts. One of the most common and most dangerous manipulation tactics is this: making you doubt your own instincts. Today we call it gaslighting. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of it, you know how disorienting it feels. It almost never starts with something big. At first, it's subtle. You bring up a concern, and they brush it off. You express discomfort, and they say, "You're overreacting." You remember an event clearly, but they insist, "That's not how it happened. You're just being too sensitive." At the beginning, you might dismiss it. You tell yourself it's not worth arguing about. But over time, something more sinister begins to happen. You start to second-guess yourself. Was I really overreacting? Did I imagine that conversation? Maybe my memory is flawed. Maybe they're right. And this is exactly how gaslighting works. It's not about one big lie. It's about slowly eroding your trust in yourself. It turns your natural instincts, your feelings, your judgment, into something you start to doubt. And the more you doubt yourself, the more you begin to lean on them for clarity. Let's take a simple example. Imagine you're at a party with your partner. You notice they're being overly flirtatious with someone else. It stings. You feel disrespected, so later you bring it up. Instead of acknowledging your feelings, they flip it back on you. "Wow, you're really jealous. I was just being friendly." You always twist things. Now pause here. In that moment, your instinct told you something was off. You felt it. You saw it. But instead of engaging with that truth, they shifted the blame to your emotions. And if you accept that framing, if you tell yourself, "Maybe I'm just being jealous," you begin to abandon your instincts and surrender your judgment to theirs. This is the trap. And it's one of the most destructive forms of manipulation, because it doesn't just distort your view of the situation, it distorts your view of yourself. The Stoics, even centuries ago, understood the danger of surrendering your judgment. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "If anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake, or looking at things from the wrong perspective, I'll gladly change. But I will not be manipulated." What he meant is powerful. He welcomed correction, but only through reason and evidence, not through guilt trips, not through emotional tricks, not through someone twisting his perception. And that is the Stoic defense against gaslighting. Trust your perception, but test it with evidence. Let me explain. The Stoics didn't say we should blindly trust every feeling we have. Feelings are real, but they're not always reliable. Fear can exaggerate threats. Anger can invent insults. Pride can distort reality. But here's the key. When you feel something, discomfort, doubt, unease, you don't ignore it. And you don't hand it over to someone else to reinterpret. Instead, you test it against reason. For example, if you feel disrespected, pause and ask yourself, what actually happened? What did I see? What did I hear? What facts support my feeling? If your partner laughed a little too loudly with someone else, maybe that's not enough evidence. But if they touched that person in a way they've never touched you in public, if others noticed it too, if your discomfort is rooted in concrete actions, then your feeling is pointing to something real. This is how Stoicism keeps you grounded. You don't dismiss your instincts, but you don't let them run wild either. You balance them with observation, clarity, and reason. The alternative, blindly accepting someone else's version of events, is what makes you vulnerable to gaslighting. Because here's the truth. Manipulators thrive when you surrender your judgment to theirs. They want you to believe that their perspective is the only reliable one. They want you to feel like your memory, your instincts, your very perception of reality can't be trusted. But the Stoic says, no, I will observe, I will test, and I will decide for myself. Let me share a quick personal reflection. Years ago, I worked with someone who had a habit of shifting blame. If a project went wrong, and I brought up a mistake they made, they'd immediately say, "That's not how it happened. You must have misunderstood." At first, I questioned myself. Maybe I really did misunderstand. But after a while, I started writing things down. Dates, conversations, agreements. And suddenly, the fog cleared. I could see the pattern. They weren't right. I had just been doubting myself without proof. Once I had evidence, I could stand firm. And do you know what happened? Their manipulation stopped working because I no longer surrendered my judgment. This is what I want you to see. You don't have to fight manipulators on their terms. You don't need to scream or prove them wrong in the heat of the moment. You just need to anchor yourself in clarity. Trust your instincts, check the facts, and refuse to abandon your judgment. Because the truth is this: you can be corrected, but you should never be controlled. So let me ask you, where in your life are you tempted to surrender your instincts? Is it in a relationship where you're told you're too sensitive? Is it at work where you're made to feel like your concerns don't matter? Is it with friends or family who dismiss your memories as overblown? Wherever it is, remember the Stoic defense. Feel your instincts, test them with evidence, and stand on your own judgment. Because clarity is your shield. And once you hold on to it, no manipulator can steal your most precious freedom, the freedom to see reality as it truly is. Tactic 2. Using emotions against you. If gaslighting attacks your judgment, the second manipulation tactic strikes at something even more primal: your emotions. Manipulators know that if they can't win with reason, they can still hijack your feelings. Because emotions, when unchecked, are powerful currents, and if you're not careful, you'll be swept away before you even realize it. How does this tactic work? It rarely looks the same in every situation. Sometimes it's tears, strategically timed to make you feel guilty for speaking up. Sometimes it's rage, a sudden explosion that leaves you off balance, silenced, desperate to avoid conflict. Sometimes it's the dreaded silent treatment, where their withdrawal makes you feel like you've done something unforgivable. And often it comes as conditional affection, a manipulator showering you with love, approval, or kindness, only when you obey them. The common thread is this: they use emotions not as genuine expressions, but as weapons. Their goal isn't to connect with you, it's to control you. And here's the dangerous result. You start living on edge, unstable, desperate for approval. You settle for crumbs of kindness, telling yourself, if I just try harder, maybe they'll stop being angry. Maybe they'll love me again. Maybe I can keep the peace. But the peace you're chasing isn't real. It's control disguised as love. The Stoics saw this clearly centuries ago. Seneca wrote, "True freedom is to be the master of your own self. He who is ruled by his emotions is not free." Think about that. Think about, if someone can hijack your emotions at will, make you feel guilt when you've done nothing wrong, fear when you're not in danger, shame when you've done nothing dishonorable, then they don't need chains to control you. They've already captured your mind. Now, manipulators are often brilliant students of human nature. They pay attention. They notice your triggers. Do you hate disappointing people? They'll use guilt. Do you fear rejection? They'll dangle affection. Do you avoid conflict at all costs? They'll weaponize silence and anger. Little by little, they push the buttons that keep you dancing to their rhythm. So what is the Stoic defense? The answer is emotional mastery. Not emotional suppression, not pretending you don't feel, but mastery. The Stoics never told us to become robots. They admitted that emotions rise like waves. But here's the difference. While most people let the wave carry them away, the Stoic learns to surf it with balance. The first step is this: feel, but don't obey. If someone tries to guilt you into submission, acknowledge the guilt. Feel it, but then ask yourself, does this guilt come from violating my own values, or from them trying to control me? If it's the latter, let the guilt pass like a cloud in the sky. Second, question your reactions. When you feel a strong emotion, pause and ask, who benefits if I give in to this feeling? If someone's anger makes you back down, who benefits? If someone's silent treatment makes you beg for attention, who benefits? When you trace the line of benefit, you expose the manipulation. Third, and this is crucial, don't trade your boundaries for temporary peace. Manipulators thrive when you choose comfort over clarity. When you say, it's easier just to give in, just to apologize, just to accept, you teach them that their tactics work. And if it works once, they'll use it again, and again, and again. Let me give you a real-world example. A woman once told me about her boss who used anger as his main weapon. Whenever someone disagreed with him, he would explode, slamming doors, raising his voice, creating such a storm that everyone backed down. At first, she thought keeping quiet was keeping the peace. But over time, she realized, peace built on silence is not peace, it's submission. So one day she tried something different. Instead of apologizing or retreating, she calmly let him rage, then responded only with facts. No anger, no fear, just calm clarity. And do you know what happened? His anger lost its edge. It stopped working on her because she refused to let his emotions dictate her actions. That is emotional mastery. You don't need to fight fire with fire. You just need to stop letting their fire burn you. Now, let me be honest. This is not easy. Emotional manipulation works because it plays on the deepest parts of who we are. Our longing for love, our fear of rejection, our desire for peace. But this is where Stoicism becomes more than philosophy. It becomes armor. Epictetus once said, "When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger." The point wasn't to excuse manipulation, but to remind us that we always have a choice, to react blindly or to respond with mastery. So the next time someone tries to hijack your emotions, here's your Stoic practice. 1. Pause. Don't rush to react. Give yourself space to breathe. 2. Name the emotion. Say to yourself, this is guilt, this is fear, this is anger. Naming it weakens its grip. 3. Ask the key question. Who benefits if I give in to this feeling? 4. Return to your values. Ask, what action aligns with who I want to be, not what they want me to be? Because the truth is this: emotions are real, but they are not rulers. They are signals, not commands. And when you learn to feel without being enslaved, when you refuse to surrender your boundaries for the illusion of peace, you become unshakable. So let me turn the question back to you. Where in your life are emotions being used against you? Is it the guilt a family member heaps on you every time you say no? Is it the rage of a colleague that silences your ideas? Is it the conditional affection of someone who gives love only when you obey? Wherever it is, remember, you have the power to master your emotions. You can feel without being ruled. You can care without being controlled. And you can love without surrendering your freedom. Because in the end, the Stoics remind us that the truest freedom is not found in changing others. It's found in mastering yourself. And when someone tries to use your emotions against you, that mastery becomes your shield. Tactic 3. Shifting blame. There's a saying that responsibility is heavy, but manipulators have found a way to never carry it. And they do that through one of the oldest, most exhausting tricks in the book, shifting blame. Think about someone in your life who never admits when they're wrong. Every conflict somehow twists back to being your fault. You bring up a broken promise, and instead of owning it, they accuse you of having unrealistic expectations. You point out a cruel remark, and they say you're just too sensitive. And slowly, without even realizing it, you find yourself apologizing for everything. Apologizing for bringing it up. Apologizing for how you felt. Sometimes even apologizing for things you didn't do. That's the trap of blame shifting. It pushes you into a position where you're always defending, always explaining, always carrying the weight of guilt that isn't actually yours to carry. And here's the goal behind it. It's not resolution. Manipulators don't shift blame to create peace. They do it to avoid accountability and to keep you on the defensive. As long as you're busy defending yourself, they never have to look in the mirror. Now I want you to pause and think. How many times in your life have you walked away from an argument feeling confused, knowing deep down that you weren't wrong, but somehow still feeling like you were the one at fault? That's not clarity. That's manipulation. The Stoics had a lot to say about responsibility. They taught that a wise person examines themselves ruthlessly. Marcus Aurelius would spend hours reflecting on his own flaws, asking, where did I fall short today? Where did I act without justice or kindness? But here's the key difference. Stoicism is about owning what truly belongs to you, not taking on what doesn't. And this is where we must be careful. The Stoic path does not mean absorbing endless blame just to keep the peace. It means practicing self-examination with brutal honesty, but also setting clear limits. Because carrying what isn't yours is not wisdom. It's slavery. Let's use an example. Imagine your friend promises to help you move on Saturday, but they don't show up. When you confront them, instead of apologizing, they say, "You expect too much from people. I never said I'd be there the whole day." Notice what happened. The focus shifted. It's no longer about them breaking their word. It's now about your unrealistic expectations. If you accept that framing, you start questioning yourself instead of holding them accountable. Or another example. Your partner makes a cruel remark in public, something that cuts deep. When you express hurt, they say, "You're way too sensitive. I was just joking." Again, the focus shifts. Instead of their responsibility for being unkind, you are suddenly guilty for being too emotional. Do you see the pattern? Shifting blame is about control. It's not about truth. It's about escape. Escape from accountability. Escape from consequences. Escape from the responsibility every human being should carry. So what's the Stoic defense? First, ruthless self-examination. Always check yourself first. Ask, did I truly overreact? Was my expectation fair? Did I miss something? If the answer is yes, own it. Apologize. Correct yourself. That is true strength. Because as Epictetus said, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Self-honesty is non-negotiable. But here's the second step, and this is just as important. Do not carry what isn't yours. If after examining yourself, you see clearly that the responsibility doesn't belong to you, refuse to take it. You don't need to argue endlessly. You don't need to scream to prove your innocence. Simply stand in clarity and refuse the weight. Because the moment you start carrying responsibility for someone else's actions, you've surrendered control of your life. Now, let me give you a practical way to spot blame shifting. Watch for these signs. Evasion. They never answer your point directly, always dancing around it. Deflection. They flip the focus back on you, your tone, your feelings, your timing. Endless debates. Instead of resolving, the conversation spirals, keeping you trapped in circles until you're too exhausted to keep going. These are not signs of resolution. They are signs of dominance. I once knew someone who used this tactic like clockwork. Anytime a conflict arose, they would immediately turn it back on the other person. It was never about what they did. It was always about how you misunderstood or you expected too much. And do you know what happened? People around them stopped calling them out. It was just too draining. They learned it was easier to apologize and move on than to fight. And that's exactly what the manipulator wanted: silence. But silence built on false blame is not peace. It's quiet submission. The Stoics would never advise that. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That applies both ways. If something isn't your fault, don't take it on just to smooth the waters. If something isn't your mistake, don't apologize just to keep someone comfortable. Because here's the truth. Constantly apologizing for what isn't yours doesn't build harmony. It destroys your self-respect. And once your self-respect is gone, you're at the mercy of anyone who wants to control you. So here's the Stoic practice I want you to carry forward. When blame is shifted onto you, pause. Examine yourself honestly. If the responsibility is yours, own it immediately. No excuses, no denial. But if it's not yours, drop it. Refuse to carry it. Let it fall where it belongs. This isn't arrogance, it's clarity. This isn't stubbornness, it's justice. Ask yourself, am I apologizing because I truly did wrong? Or because I've been made to feel guilty for someone else's failure? That single question could save you years of unnecessary guilt, unnecessary apologies, and unnecessary self-doubt. Because the Stoics remind us, peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of truth. And truth means giving responsibility to whom it belongs. No more, no less. So the next time someone tries to shift blame onto you, remember this. You can be honest without being a doormat. You can be self-aware without being self-blaming. You can seek peace without sacrificing truth. That balance, that ability to examine yourself with humility, but refuse to carry what isn't yours, that is the Stoic shield against blame shifting. And once you hold that shield, no manipulator can bury you under the weight of their own responsibility. Tactic 4. Testing and pushing boundaries. Manipulators are patient hunters. They rarely come at you head-on with a demand so outrageous you'd immediately reject it. Instead, they start small. They test. They push. And if you allow it, even once, they take another step and another, until your boundaries are nothing more than lines in the sand, washed away by the tide. Here's how it often begins. A small favor you don't really want to do, but you say yes because it feels easier than saying no. A joke at your expense that stings, but you laugh it off to keep the peace. A mild insult disguised as playful teasing, which you brush aside because you don't want to seem too sensitive. None of these moments feel catastrophic on their own, but together they create a dangerous pattern. Every time you tolerate the small disrespect, you signal that a larger disrespect will also be tolerated. And manipulators thrive on that signal. Over time, what happens? The favors become expectations. The jokes become sharper, crueler. The insults become normalized. And before you know it, your self-respect has eroded, your autonomy has weakened, and you're left wondering how you lost so much ground without even noticing it. This is why Stoicism insists on the importance of boundaries, not as walls to keep people out, but as pillars that hold up your dignity and your freedom. The Stoics taught that courage is not just about grand, heroic acts. Courage is built in the small, consistent moments where you honor yourself. Seneca once said, "Bravery is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act rightly in spite of it." And one of the most overlooked acts of bravery is simply saying no when everything inside you wants to avoid conflict. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you have a colleague who always makes jokes about your work ethic. The first time you laugh it off, even though it bothers you. The second time, it cuts deeper, but you tell yourself it's just their personality. By the 10th time, their words have shaped the way others see you, and worse, the way you see yourself. And yet, the door was opened by those first few moments when you chose silence over courage. Or think about relationships. A partner tests boundaries with small demands, maybe reading your messages, maybe questioning your friendships. You resist at first, but they frame it as love, as care, as protection. Slowly, you surrender. And years later, you look back and realize the freedom you once had is gone. Not because they stole it in one blow, but because you gave it away piece by piece. This is the danger of unchallenged testing. Manipulators don't need to kick down doors. They just need you to keep them unlocked. So how do we defend ourselves? The Stoic defense is simple in words, but difficult in practice. The courage to say no. Now I know what you might be thinking. But if I say no, won't I create conflict? Won't I seem selfish? Won't people get angry? And yes, sometimes they will. But here's the truth the Stoics remind us of. Peace built on surrender is not peace. Respect built on silence is not respect. If someone only values you when you abandon your own boundaries, what they value is not you. It's their control over you. Saying no doesn't make you selfish. Saying no makes you free. And freedom is the foundation of true respect. Because when you honor your own boundaries, you teach others how to honor them too. So how can you practice this Stoic courage? Start small. The next time someone makes a joke at your expense, instead of laughing it off, calmly say, "That's not funny to me." The next time you're asked for a favor you don't want to do, instead of making an excuse, simply say, "No, I can't help with that." The first time you do it, your heart will race, your body will shake. But here's the paradox. Each time you say no, it gets easier. And with each no, you rebuild a piece of your self-respect. The Stoics also remind us to separate fear from reality. Most of the time, the conflict we fear from saying no is far worse in our imagination than in real life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your judgment of it." In other words, what you dread is often just a shadow. The act of saying no is rarely as catastrophic as you fear. Let me share a personal reflection. I once worked under a manager who tested boundaries constantly. He would call late at night with urgent tasks that weren't urgent at all. At first, I said yes, because I wanted to be seen as reliable. But soon, it became the expectation. It drained my energy, my time, my life outside of work. Finally, I gathered the courage to say no. I told him clearly, "I will handle this during work hours, not at midnight." And yes, it was uncomfortable. But do you know what happened? He adjusted. The only reason he was pushing those boundaries was because I had never stopped him. That's when I realized, manipulators don't respect your silence. They exploit it. They only respect the boundaries you defend. So ask yourself, where in your life are your boundaries being tested? Is it the friend who constantly asks for favors but never returns them? The colleague who hides insults in jokes? The partner who slowly chips away at your independence? And then ask, what would courage look like in this moment? Not anger, not aggression, not cruelty, but the calm, steady courage of simply saying, "No, this is my line, and I will not move it." Because boundaries are not selfish. They are acts of self-respect. And without self-respect, you cannot have true freedom. The Stoics knew this well. Seneca taught that bravery is not found in the big speeches or dramatic gestures. It's in the consistent, quiet choices to honor your values, protect your dignity, and stand firm when it would be easier to bend. So remember this. Manipulators test boundaries not to learn who you are, but to see how much of yourself you're willing to give away. Every time you hold the line, you remind both them and yourself that you are not for sale. And that courage, practiced daily in small acts of self-respect, builds the kind of strength no manipulator can erode. Tactic 5. Creating dependence. Of all the manipulation tactics, this one may be the most subtle and the most devastating, creating dependence. Unlike rage or blame shifting, this strategy doesn't look hostile at first. In fact, it often looks like love, care, and intimacy. The manipulator makes you feel special by saying things like, "No one understands you like I do," or "You can always count on me. Others will let you down." And at first, it feels comforting. It feels like safety. But slowly, beneath the surface, it begins to turn into a trap. Because here's what's really happening. They're not trying to give you freedom. They're trying to isolate you. Step by step, they plant seeds of doubt about your family, your friends, your support system. They'll say, "Your friends don't really get you," or "Your parents never cared for you the way I do." And as those doubts grow, you begin to lean more heavily on them. Your circle shrinks. Your trust narrows. And eventually, they become the only voice you listen to. But it doesn't stop there. Once they've chipped away at your external support, they begin eroding your internal one, your confidence, your self-trust. You'll hear phrases like, "You always make mistakes, let me handle this," or "You're not good with decisions, but don't worry, I'll take care of it." And little by little, you start to believe it. The result? You begin to doubt yourself in situations where you were once confident. You hesitate to make choices without their approval. You second-guess your instincts. And before you realize it, your independence is gone. This is dependence disguised as love, control disguised as care. And it is one of the most dangerous prisons, because the walls are invisible. You don't feel locked in, you feel protected. You don't realize you've been disarmed until you try to step out and discover that the voice in your head is no longer your own. The Stoics would call this the greatest tragedy, to hand over the governance of your own mind to another person. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." In other words, your freedom, your peace, your happiness. These do not depend on someone else's approval. They depend on your own thoughts, your own choices, your own ability to trust yourself. So what is the Stoic defense against dependence? It is self-reliance, the unshakable commitment to trust your own judgment, even when others try to convince you otherwise. Now, let's be clear. Stoicism doesn't mean rejecting love, friendship, or partnership. The Stoics valued community deeply, but they drew a line. True love, true friendship, true partnership does not demand dependence. It encourages autonomy. A partner who truly loves you wants you to grow, to think clearly, to stand strong. They don't want to own you. They want to walk beside you. That's how you can tell the difference between love and control. Love builds your strength. Control erodes it. Let me give you an example. A man once told me about his relationship where his partner would handle all financial matters. At first, it seemed thoughtful. She insisted, "Don't worry about the bills. I'll take care of everything." But over time, he realized he had no idea what was happening with his own money. Anytime he asked, she'd say, "You wouldn't understand. You always make mistakes with numbers." Eventually, he felt completely dependent. He couldn't make financial decisions on his own. His confidence was gone. That's not partnership. That's control. But then he started rebuilding his independence. He began studying finances himself, asking questions, keeping records. Slowly, his confidence grew, and when he finally reclaimed control, he realized the truth. He wasn't incapable. He had just been convinced to believe he was. This is the power of Stoic independence. It doesn't reject support, but it refuses to surrender self-trust. So, how can you practice this in your own life? First, regularly ask yourself, am I trusting my own judgment or outsourcing it to someone else? If you can't make a decision without someone's approval, pause and reflect. Is this healthy partnership or disguised dependence? Second, strengthen your self-trust by making small decisions independently. The Stoics taught that self-mastery is built in daily practice. You don't need to start with life-changing choices. Start with small ones. Plan a day your way. Solve a problem on your own. Test your instincts against reality. Each time you succeed, your confidence grows. Third, watch for the subtle signs of dependence. Do you feel isolated from friends and family? Do you hear constant messages that you're not capable without them? Do you feel weaker over time instead of stronger? These are red flags that what looks like care is actually control. And finally, remember the Stoic truth. Your thoughts are your kingdom. No one else can govern them unless you hand them over. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that is the essence of the defense. Freedom is not found in cutting ties with everyone. It's found in refusing to let anyone own your mind. So let me ask you, where in your life might dependence be creeping in? Is there someone who convinces you you're less capable than you really are? Is there a relationship that shrinks your world instead of expanding it? If so, it's time to remember who you are. You are not weak. You are not incapable. You are not defined by anyone else's approval. You are capable of standing, deciding, and living with strength. Because the Stoics remind us of a truth manipulators hope you'll forget. The foundation of freedom is self-reliance. And no matter how deeply someone tries to control you, the moment you reclaim your trust in yourself, you reclaim your life. We've walked together through some of the most common and destructive tactics manipulators use. And maybe, as you listened, you recognize some of these patterns in your own life. Gaslighting that makes you question your instincts. Emotional hijacking that keeps you off balance. Blame shifting that loads you with guilt you don't deserve. Boundary testing that chips away at your self-respect. And perhaps the most dangerous of all, dependence disguised as love. This is what manipulation is at its core. Not open force, but quiet control. Not a visible chain, but an invisible thread that ties your choices, your confidence, and your clarity to someone else's agenda. But here's the good news. Once you see it, it begins to lose its power. Manipulation thrives in fog. It survives in confusion. But clarity kills it. And this is where Stoic wisdom becomes your greatest shield. The Stoics were not naive. They knew human nature is messy. They knew people could be selfish, controlling, and deceptive. But they also knew that no one could own your mind unless you handed it to them. So let's bring it all together. First, the Stoics teach us to protect our perception and judgment. Your instincts are valuable. They are your inner compass. Don't let someone convince you they're broken. Question them. Test them against reason, but never surrender them. Second, master your emotions. Feel them fully, but don't obey them blindly. The moment someone can push a button and make you act against your values, you've lost your freedom. Emotional mastery means you can feel guilt, fear, or anger without being ruled by it. Third, set boundaries calmly and firmly. A boundary is not cruelty. A boundary is clarity. Every time you say no to disrespect, you say yes to your dignity. And the courage to hold those lines, even in small daily acts, is what builds lasting self-respect. Fourth, refuse misplaced guilt. Self-examine ruthlessly, yes, but don't carry what isn't yours. Manipulators thrive on making you apologize for their mistakes. But when you stand firm in the truth, the weight they try to place on your shoulders falls harmlessly to the ground. And fifth, guard your independence. True love, true friendship, true leadership never demand dependence. They encourage strength. They build you up. Anyone who needs you to be weak to feel strong is not your ally. They're your captor. And the Stoics remind us, happiness is found not in another's approval, but in your own clarity of thought. Now, let me leave you with this final image. A Stoic is like a lighthouse on a stormy coast. The waves crash, the winds howl, the fog tries to swallow everything in confusion, but the lighthouse does not move. It doesn't shout. It doesn't chase the ships. It simply shines, clear, steady, unmoved. And because of its clarity, others cannot ignore it. That's what you become when you refuse manipulation. You don't need to fight louder, push harder, or dominate others. You just need to stand in clarity, to see things as they are, to hold your ground, and in that clarity, manipulation has no place to live, because at the end of the day, a manipulator's greatest weapon is your blindness, and your greatest defense is your vision. So remember this: a Stoic faces the truth without flattery, without fear, without illusion. And when you walk with that kind of clarity, you walk free. Clarity is freedom. And where clarity lives, manipulation dies. So now the question is, where have you seen these tactics at work in your own life? Was it gaslighting that made you doubt your instincts? Emotional games that left you unsteady? Or subtle tests of your boundaries that chipped away at your strength? Take a moment to reflect. And then, share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be the reminder someone else needs to see clearly. If this message resonated with you, give this video a like. It helps spread these timeless Stoic lessons to more people who need them. And don't forget to subscribe and join this community, where together, we're not chasing noise or illusions, but building clarity, courage, and unshakable freedom. Because remember, manipulation dies where clarity lives. And the Stoic journey is about walking with that clarity every single day.